All right, next up, Rebecca Murphey.
I met so many of you that I can't keep track today, so thank you to the folks at the Times for having me and taking lunch, and it was all lovely. I want to take this out of this stand because it's just really tall and weird. I want to talk about Johnny 5, which is what we were talking about at the booth, booth earlier this evening. And I really want to talk about how Johnny 5 is an open source project that is bringing not just JavaScript to hardware, but kind of the culture of JavaScript to hardware too. How many people here do things with JavaScript right now? Damn. That was everyone, pretty much, I think. So I work for Boku. It's a company up in Boston. I live in North Carolina and work from home. My colleague Rick is somewhere in the room. There he is. And if you have any questions about any of this, you can talk to him as well. He's here in New York, so you might bump into him now and then. But at Boku, we do a whole lot of work with open source, and we do consulting, we do training, but if we're not doing consulting or training, we're pretty much working on open source projects. And this is an open source project. Johnny 5 is a project that Rick started about 7 months ago, and it's pretty cool. Our overall focus at Boku is on JavaScript and on the open web in general. And JavaScript has a culture that is really deeply rooted in open source, I think. And even more than open source, it's kind of rooted in view source, which I kind of think is involuntary open source. Whether you like it or not, we can see it, for better or for worse. And so, it's how a lot of us got our start doing JavaScript, I think, was opening up view source, maybe even in like the bad old days of IE6, and looking at what makes this work. And for me, I remember vividly being on this blog, which looks pretty much the same 11 years later. But I remember vividly being on this blog sometime in the early 2000s and seeing this click to have links open in new windows. How do they do that magic? Because they weren't reloading the page, like it's just how you click this button and links open in new windows. And then you unclick it and then they don't. And so I went and I found, that checkbox in the source, and then I searched around and figured out that there was a function that was bound to it, and there was an on-click attribute on the checkbox probably, and that on-click ran this target links. And I learned that I could use code to change my web page, like to change my HTML. I got HTML just fine, but that was kind of boring, and now I learned that I could use JavaScript to change it. The real story is that this is what debugging was like then, not Chrome. So I'm leaving a lot of parts out of what that was really like back in those bad old days. But the point is that JavaScript is kind of built on this culture of being able to see what other people are doing, like I said, whether they like it or not. And I think that that's a large part of why we see a graph that looks like this. JavaScript, it was a year or more ago that JavaScript became the most prevalent language on GitHub. It is the language that people are sharing the most. It's the language that people are not just throwing their code up on GitHub and leaving it, but having conversations about it, opening pull requests, opening issues, collaboration is really happening with JavaScript on GitHub. Which crazy, did you know GitHub didn't exist in 2007? I looked that up, it's nuts. And we also see with JavaScript things like JS Fiddle and JS Bin and JS Perf. These are things that can't happen with other, it's really difficult for them to happen with other languages, to have these tools that exist in the environment where the code is running, but that environment where the code is running is also one that you can share with other people. That's a crazy thing about JavaScript. And yeah, there's Replit, which lets you kind of do this for Ruby, but like this is unique to JavaScript. And it's a unique thing about JavaScript, this ability to share. And it's kind of built into the JavaScript blood. So what I want to talk about tonight is Johnny 5 and how, like I said, Johnny 5 is kind of bringing the culture of JavaScript to hardware. And you know, I'm talking about the culture of JavaScript and resource. So what is the culture of JavaScript? That's the culture of JavaScript. Seriously, there was like a movement at the first JS Conf in 2009 to make there be bacon on the second day because we had drank so much beer on the first day. But really, the culture of JavaScript is one of view source and sharing by default, sharing almost involuntarily, whether you like it or not. Another huge part of the JavaScript culture is Jquery and how that completely changed the face of writing JavaScript code. You know, it used to be terrible, and they hid all of that terribleness from you using this really, really pleasant API that has completely informed how we write all sorts of JavaScript libraries now. That whole idea of chaining, it's not that Jquery invented it, but Jquery made it the way that we solve these sorts of problems. And you see in Johnny 5 that we sort of brought that to that Rick has brought that to that. I didn't do anything with that. Show and tell via JS Fiddle is encouraged and enabled because of the nature of JavaScript. We work together on solutions, and most importantly, we embrace the crazy. Like, crazy things happen in this community, and we'll talk about some of those in the end. Hey, so Johnny 5 is a JavaScript API that lets you program this little guy. This is an Arduino. It costs about 22 bucks. You can get it Amazon Primed, and here in the city, you can get it Amazon like to date, or however that works. When I used to visit the city a lot, that was always like a perk to get something delivered the same day. And Johnny 5 lets you take that little board and some stuff like an LCD and a potentiometer, which is that blue thing, and some buttons and those sorts of things, and make something like this. This is a little rock, paper, scissors game that I wrote. Or if you came to our booth, it lets you make a like 3-dimensional axis robot that you can control and pick up stickers with, which is a lot cooler than a rock, paper, scissors game. But the point is that robot that Rick was running and the rock, paper, scissors game, like, there's hardly any code at all. Like, the robot thing was 36 lines and half of them were comments. The rock, paper, scissors game is that long over there. It's 106 lines, and most of it is the logic for rock, paper, scissors, not for listening to the buttons being clicked and displaying the data on the screen. Like, most of the code there is code that's actually unique to the problem you're solving. Whereas in C, which is the language that you use to program Arduino normally, we don't have events like we have in JavaScript, which is such a natural thing to have when you're dealing with hardware. Like, you don't want to like poll, is the button pushed, 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 is the button pushed. You don't want to, like, it's stupid. And so in JavaScript, we say, when someone pushes the button, how about you let me know? And you know, in JavaScript, you say, I want to write these words to this LCD screen. Crazy. And the way that we say things like this is in this very jQuery sort of way. Clear my LCD and print some stuff to it. And it chains too. Rick, I think, fixed this because I don't think my original LCD implementation actually chained. But Rick hit it, so it did. So the story of the LCD API in particular is one that's close to my heart because it was something that I worked on with this guy I've never met. And that's kind of the cool thing about open source and the cool thing about JavaScript. One of the really cool things about JavaScript is I probably will meet him someday because there's such a great community of people in the language, and we get together and we make a point of it, and we get together, we meet each other, and then the next year we get together and we bring our families, we bring our kids to the conference and hang out in the hot tub, and it's great. So, seriously, it happens. So the story of the LCD is that I had been Rick is doing all this crazy stuff with like robots and arms moving around, and for whatever reason I want to do really boring stuff like show words on a screen because we don't do that all the time. So that's what I want. I was really interested in, like, how can I make this work? How can I make words be on a screen, but like on my desk instead of on my desk? And so I didn't know where to start in reading there were C libraries to do this, but they were really scary. And I wanted to be writing in JavaScript. And so one day this gist shows up from this guy, Andreas, out in California. And he had gotten this working. He had bought an LCD off the internet somewhere. And he had gotten it working. And the code that he wrote was horrendous. And he knew it. Like, I don't think he would really argue with me about this, that this was some pretty terrible code. But Rick and I were like so freaking excited. We probably cloned this just in about 30 seconds. And I had been doing some work with these things called shift registers in the previous weeks. And I won't get into what they are, but they're basically a way to shift binary data out to devices. So you can, control a little, like a 7-segment display, like the digit on your alarm clock. You can send individual bits to the shift register and then say, okay, now light up, these 3 pieces. And then you get light up these 2 pieces and then you get a 1, or light up these 4 pieces and then you get a 4. So I learned about how to do this, and so I was able to look and see this and realize that I knew how to do this a whole lot better. And this whole thread emerged on the gist, and we're like, I'm in a hotel room in Boston, my partner's with me, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not talking to you. And I have I had brought my Arduino stuff with me, it's all over the bed, and I'm like, trying to figure all this out. And so this was great fun. And after a couple of days, we had worked together, me and Rick and Andreas, to land an API for this LCD. And also a big part of the work that goes into Johnny 5 is making it so there's not just code, but there's pictures of how to make this work for yourself, which is honestly is the hardest part. Like, there's no copy and paste for putting wires into little holes. And so over and over and over again, I have found that with a library like Johnny 5, the most time-consuming thing isn't writing the code. The code is like nothing. The code is just like, I want there to be an LCD and I want to put some words on it. Like, boom, that happens. But like this takes a long time to get all the wires right and everything. So all the time I'm spending more time wiring stuff than I'm spending actually writing code to make it work together. And so now we can work with an LCD as easily as this, through this collaboration, through GitHub, and through this sort of like culture of, look what I made, and I want to share it with you, and I'm willing to take your feedback, and I'm willing to take your input, and we're gonna like figure this out and make this thing. We made this thing. And so now you can just say, I want there to be an LCD, these are the pins that I'm gonna plug it into, and then we can talk to it, using this API that you don't need to read any docs to know what that API does. Like, it's kind of like Jquery, you can just read it. The really cool thing is that, I worked on the LCD, I worked on the LED matrix, I worked on an API for the shift register, but there's all sorts of things that you can control with this. So it's these servos, which are the things that ultimately are controlling this crazy gripper arm thing that Rick is doing. Lasers, fun. Motors. This is a bendy sensor, so you bend it and you get a value out of it, and so you can, I don't know, it's just fun. And this is a really unreliable rangefinder. Rick was saying reliable ones cost like $80, but unreliable ones cost about $5, so that's cool. So there are all these things, and Rick has done whole things where you take one of these little rangefinder things and you put it on a servo, and it spins back and forth, and it captures the data, and then he takes the data and he runs it to a web server, and then the web server runs it over WebSockets, and like now you have a radar display in your web browser of like what, and all of this is mounted on top of a vehicle with tank treads. And so, and the vehicle like is hearing what the radar is seeing, and so it's avoiding obstacles. And like all of this is probably a few hundred lines of code. Crazy stuff. Even crazier, Chris Williams, who's the creator of JSConf, and based on some work that our colleague Irene did, or building on some work that our colleague Irene did, made an API for working with the Wii nunchuck. So you can listen to, you cut off this part, and there turns out there's 4 wires that come out, or something like that. You plug them in, and now you can listen to like people pushing buttons and moving the stick around on the Wii nunchuck, which means you can fly helicopters. Which is just, yeah. It's really fun. They make noise and like dive bomb you. Aside from all this like fun stuff that you can do with it, we're 7 months after this came out. We're moving kind of like possibly toward people actually using it to do real things, not just fly helicopters and like make laser rangefinder pointer things. This is an open source undersea robot that is Arduino based, and they have their own Node.js thing that they've been doing. But they just heard about this library called Johnny 5, and they're like, oh, we should maybe kind of use that instead. And so there are also people, there was drinking, and so I can't remember who it was or exactly what the story was, but someone at a conference I was just at in the UK was saying that they're getting paid money to do this sort of stuff now. And part of what makes it so interesting is that because it's JavaScript, A, everyone in this room knows how to do it already. B, integrating with servers and integrating with like the devices that we all have is just trivial. Like getting stuff on the web or like making a thing on your iPhone that will like fly a helicopter is not, it's not even remotely far-fetched. It's very, very possible, and so people are starting to actually get paid money to do this, which is crazy. These are some links. The repo is at Johnny 5, and I have the little projects I was doing up there. Rick is really good about, as he makes cool things, putting them into the main repo so that you can play with them and try them yourselves. If you're interested in getting started with this, there's a kit. It's called the SparkFun Inventors Kit. It's $100. It comes with an Arduino. It comes with a bunch of sensors and some servos and those sorts of things. It's a good. And it also comes with little circuit diagrams, so you can like learn about how to not make things catch on fire. And if you're interested, that's the place to start, and then you will start spending a lot of money on hardware after that. That's all I've got. I'm Rebecca Murphy. I work at Boku. Say hi. So, thank you.